For me, like back then, 1998, when I came to Paris, I'd been nowhere. Like I lived in upstate New York, just outside the city, and the most foreign place I had gone in my life was the beaches in Jersey, in New Jersey. That was like the most foreign place I went. And in '98, when I came to Paris, I came for a month to visit a girl that was doing a year abroad. And I remember coming out of the metro and seeing the Metropolitan sign and being like, and just seeing the architecture and going, wow, I am in a different world. And I found it so beautiful. And at the time I was having this like this sort of debate with myself because I had just become the singer in a band. And I was afraid, like all of the songs that I was singing about, that had my truth in them, I didn't want the attention being a singer to get drawn to them, if that makes any sense. So I decided I was going to create a piece of fiction, a piece of science fiction. And I was here in the city and I was like, it just sparked it. And I started writing songs while I was here. And two of them made the first record. One was called Time Consumer and the other was June Song Provision. But yeah, the initial idea of the Amory Wars and Coheed and Cambria was born here in Paris. In the new record, I came back. New record, my wife and I, we took writing retreats. We took a writing retreat. She went to Italy and I stayed here in this neighborhood in the 9th arrondissement. And I wrote Blindside Sunny and Mary of Mercy in Paris that are on the new record, Father of Make Believe. It was beautiful. The weather I had was amazing. It was sun every day. And the place that I stayed, it was like the top floor of this, it was an Airbnb, so it was the top floor of the apartment, and I could see Sacré-Cœur in the distance. It was so beautiful, man. And I realized when I wrote those songs, it was like the first time I had ever been alone in a long time. Like my son was home in New York with his grandparents. Chandra, my wife, was in Italy, and I was here. Like I was here alone, and I feel like those two songs, you really get a sense of like where I was at alone, like. One with my thoughts and like overthinking to the point of like suffering, and that's where Blindside Sunny came out. And then the other was Mary of Mercy, where it's like almost like this longing for companionship, wanting to be together again, which I loosely based after the relationship of my grandfather and my grandmother. And yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was nice. Like I came here thinking, oh yeah, I'll go for a writing retreat. Hopefully something will happen. And it's funny, like 2 songs came out of it, whereas like 20 some odd years ago, when I first came to Paris and it was inspired to create this, I wrote 2 songs here then. Right, I mean, sometimes I think like, if I had the power, every once in a while I get posed the question of like, if you had a superpower, what would you do? Right? Obvious question to ask the guy in the rock band, right? Who has a comic book. But it's a good question because you know what? If I did have a superpower, I'd want to go in the past. I'd want time travel, and I'd always opt for the past before the future. And because there's just something about it. Like I'd like to see the way things were before like my generation's stamp on the world. Like,
When would you go? When would you go?
Well, I'd probably, at first, I'd probably go back to the 80s just to see my grandparents young, to get a real sense of what their relationship was, to see my parents young when maybe they had first met each other, like, on the bus, like going into Manhattan. Those would be like sort of the places I'd go initially. Not too deep into the future or deep into the past, but like more so just to see family members that I haven't in such a long time. Maybe see what trees were still standing, in those times. But then I would probably after visiting those moments, I'd explore a little more and go deeper and maybe even, and definitely outside of America. This is a great quote because, it's funny. Like, as a musician, I'm not a schooled musician. I don't know music theory. I don't understand. I can't read music. All I do is when I write music is I find when it makes me feel a certain way. Do I feel like I'm going in the right direction? When a chorus happens and I get that feeling in my body that, I'm answering the question the verse is posing. I feel like that's all because of my imagination. And I actually love that quote. This might be the first time I've actually heard it in a context pertaining to like a rock band interview. But I think that's accurate. I was inspired, unfortunately, by the loss of my uncle. I had been writing all this material right out of the last record. Like, I just kept writing because I was afraid. I didn't really know how I was going to follow up Window of the Waking Mind because I loved Window of the Waking Mind. I'm so proud of that album. So I just kept writing, and unfortunately, I lost my uncle, and it put some things into perspective. Like, I felt so heartbroken for his wife because he was, kind of young, and it reminded me of my grandfather who lived 35, 40 years of his life without his wife, who had died, fairly young, and so for me, it just started to pose all those questions that you get with mortality. I'm getting older, like it's becoming real, and that's the thing. It just started to pose those questions of like what life would be like without me or without my wife. A song like Yesterday's Lost is very much about that. I mean, it starts the record off like that. What if I just allowed my truths to speak in the songs exclusively? How would I have been, or how would Coheed be perceived now at this point in my life? And those are it. I mean, it just all these questions that one asks themselves in their midlife. That's really kind of what started the real themes of the record. I mean, Goodbye Sunshine is basically about me standing at the funeral procession of Coheed and Cambria, like triumphing and tributing all that it's given me in life, but saying goodbye to it. So yeah, I mean that's really kind of it. And like when it came to writing stuff, I mean, most of the time I'm writing it, with the exception of Blindside Sunny and Mary of Mercy, which I wrote out here, most of the time I'm writing in my house in Brooklyn, New York. And I have a lot of, things at my disposal. I've a stand-up piano in one room. I have the studio in another with a bunch of synthesizers and modular Euro rack modules, guitars. I have a lot of instruments in my house. So a lot of it just kind of starts from me, and just that solitude and that personal touch. And then as a band, we really kind of curate the music around it and arrange the songs to what you hear in the end. To me, it's that. It's just all the questions. That's the real inspiration, just like what is life going to be like with those voids that kind of happen, and just the questions of identity that you ask yourself as you get to this stage in your life, the things that you had chosen to do way back when that now define who you are as an adult, because you find yourself like almost disconnected from the younger version of you. The younger version of me was like so insecure, and I still am to a degree, absolutely, but I think I'm a little more open to sharing the honesties behind the records than I was back then. So you find that this young person in the past is really what's defined the older person in the now, and it just sparks a lot of questions. Again, like what would life have been like if the me now was the me then? And that's really kind of it. That's what I drew a lot from, or what I found in the after was drawn from when I listened to the record. There is, I mean, not, the newest character is Blindside Sunny, but as far as like the story of Vaxis goes, it's a little more removed from the Coheed and Cambria story. Though it still lives very much in the Amory Wars, it's, you know, the difference I think I see is that myself, as the writer, I definitely found a connection more with the father figure of the last two records. Because I think of Window of the Waking Mind, and essentially that record was about parenting a child through the pandemic. You know, that's like the theme of that album. But now, Father of Make Believe, I really see a connection with myself and the character of Vaxis, which is the central figure of the story. Because, you know, there are all these decisions that I'm questioning and wondering what the future now holds, knowing who I am. And the character of Vaxis in the story is now realizing that he has the power to create the future in his image. And so I'm really finding that my connection between characters is changing. And I'm now almost fueling the main character more so than I was the father. Is this record subtly connects itself to one of the older Coheed and Cambria records called The Afterman, because a character from that story resurfaces in these. And so I brought his theme back at the top of the record, because I thought that would be a lot of fun for Coheed fans. Because if you're a Coheed fan and you invest in the comic book concept side of things, then you've probably read Vaxis II, A Window of the Waking Mind, and you realize at the end of that story, the character of Cyrus Amory comes back.